Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I'm going to give a shout out to Manosphere Hall of Fame first because he pointed out to me something that I didn't understand at first based on my literal understanding of another word. Misandry literally means, when translated from Greek into English, the hatred men. I tend to think of hatred as being a conscious thing. Contempt could be subconscious, I guess, if you call it that. But hatred, I assume, is something of which the holder is aware. Therefore, I can tell you this. When Manosphere Hall of Fame said that regular run-of-the-mill men uphold misandry, I was thinking of a conscious hatred of men as though we are worthless. I wasn't thinking of that as according to a looser definition of misandry, which is more, if it's a looser definition, not as strict as the literal one, it will be more like a subconscious contempt or disappointment in men as if we are worth less, not worthless. Yes, average run-of-the-mill, regular everyday men have been tricked into supporting the second notion and upholding it because you can do it subconsciously. Now that I understand that, he pointed out as well that Melli Monaco wound up with an NBA retired star. I forgot his name, but that's not his fault. And Melli Monaco, though she has financially done well for herself, has not had to do nearly the same thing to herself that he had to do to himself to get where he is. But she's with him. If you look at the Superman-Lois Lane phenomena, you must also look at the Superman and Lois Lane storyline in whatever comic book companies and movie companies have owned the stories and the rights to the story. And the thing you must understand is that Superman never got rich, neither did Lois Lane. It wasn't really about that. However, I can tell you that even Superman would not have been able to just make a whole lot of money being Superman, because who would be willing to pay him if they know he can easily do this stuff? Clark Kent probably could have, but not as Superman. In today's time, especially. But Lois Lane, in today's time, could easily make a ton of money. She could start off with a few booty pics, feet pics. She could start off with just that, and she'd make some money. Then when her audience got bored with that, they would say, well, we want to see you doing some solo stuff. Why don't you play with yourself? Then she could call a few dudes over. And then do some X-rated stuff. Sell that. She could make some money, and eventually that would dry up, but that would take a while. And of course, the audience would begin to demand more deranged and debaucherous things if they're truly addicts, because that's what addiction does. And then, of course, I don't have to tell you what that entails, what that means. Eventually, she'd say, okay, this is the limit. I'm done with this. I'm not doing this no more. But before she gets to a point where she's disappointed in what she must do and how little money comes in because she must do it. She might be able to make a lot of money, and she certainly would try to do it, and she would make more than if she just worked an honest job. That's the proof, not the truth, but the proof. KROOF, exclamation mark. We have been conditioned to accept that. We've even been conditioned to think, look, if you want to be ever on the receiving end, if you ever want to be one of them dudes in her videos, you got to pay, and you got to pay dearly. Not just pay like to take care of a wife, but you got to pay dearly. You got to really sacrifice yourself. Become super skilled at something very rare and preclusive. And then you have to be financially rewarded for it. Now, let me tell you about the NBA and the NFL. You already know that for every one of them cats that made it, they will tell you that they had plenty of classmates, colleagues, partners with whom they grew up, with whom they played ball, that were in the gym with them, practicing, but they didn't make it to the pros. And it wasn't their fault either. So you can do these things, make the sacrifice, and not get the rewards, and the women will be just as absent as the money you never got rewarded. Because the women ain't there for your talent or your skill. They're there for your resources. There you go. So I say that to say that we've been conditioned to accept a hypergamy that doesn't have any limits. That's not rational. And one of the things for which I will give the British aristocracy some credit is that they have generally put into the minds of the upper class of England in general, even beyond the aristocracy, even beyond royalty, that if you are doing well in life, you don't marry women that are not doing nearly as well as you. They called it a misalliance. That meant a mismarriage, a bad marriage. Even when it was the man that had and the woman that had far too much less than that man to qualify, she still needed to have something. A lot of women will balk at that and say, it's the man's job to provide. Okay, well, you still need to have something. You're not going to provide the man with what you have. Sure, okay, fine. But do you have a backup? Or do you have to get that man to get that backup in the first place? Imagine you just say to a woman, look, you know what? You ain't got to spend nothing on me. I just want to know you got it as a backup in case I pass away. What does that matter to you? Because I need to know that you're picking me for me and not so that you can get that backup that you need in case a man passes away. And they would actually balk and get mad at the notion that you tell them to pick you for you. They want you to believe that's what it is, but if you tell them they have to, they get mad. We've been trained to accept that hypergamy doesn't need to have a limit. Now, if we can't get rid of hypergamy, and we never sought to as men in the first place, we still can put a limit and a cap on it. Okay, this is the maximum difference between my station and yours. I'm willing to accept. I got to be above you. Fine. I'm only willing to be this far above you before I ignore your ass and you become invisible. Because there are going to be some other women, I'm still above them, but they're closer to my station. We never flip that on them. And to do it, we have to do it collectively. Now, does this mean policing each other's dinglings? Well, I don't think it means policing each other's private lives, but public choices, hell yucking fair. Or fell hucking yeah. It means policing public choices down to who you're willing to pick up and pay on Figueroa Street. Is that the name of the street still? Yeah, that's what it means. It means that, look, you know what? Private life, maybe not, but who you gonna marry and wife up? Who you gonna party with even? Who you gonna be seen out in public with? If nobody knows about her, we can't police it. It's not our job. We're not looking for it. But you know what? That's still gonna come to light too, and it's gonna become public. If you out here smashing these low life broads in private, and they get misled into thinking it means you are validating them, well then damn, you need to stop doing that too. And to a certain extent, we need to watch men need to understand that fornication don't pay off. You fornicate with these broads, even when it's private, it doesn't pay off. There's always a price to pay. They will make sure there's a price to pay for that. If there's nothing else they're going to get out of it, a false allegation is enough. Doesn't net them anything, but it'll make you pay because they can't stand the thought of you not having to pay something. It's better that you determine up front what you're going to. One thing I love about going the marriage route instead of the fornication route is what my job is already set from jump. And the first time we're alone together, I get to hit that. And the way I treat it is you get this ding-a-ling. You get to bounce up and down on top of this ding-a-ling till you spray and squirt everywhere. That's the way I present it. Am I willing to make it worth it? Yeah, sure. Of course. But the thing I like about it is no, they don't get to come along and act like, oh, you know what? I'm doing you this favor and you need to pay me and you need to keep paying and paying and paying and paying. And, oh, and by the way, you need to have everything to lose and I have nothing to lose but everything to gain in order for this deal to work. See, what I'm trying to tell you is that they're not just looking for the best deal for themselves. It's beyond that level of hypergamy. They're also out there looking for the worst deal for you. That's why it was that Brittany Renner demanded a PJ Washington. That's why it was that he's got to be a retired NBA star to get Melli Monaco. Because they're going off of the Superman-Lois Lane syndrome. You got to be Superman to qualify for Lois Lane. That's why. They are not interested in a win-win situation. It must be you lose as well. And sometimes that's even more important. And that's what I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand that. Some of you may say, well, Jet Black, how did you come to understand the malice that is oftentimes a motive for the Westernisha? I wish that I could tell the story differently. I'm still learning how much malice is involved. But the notion that there is malice and intent in this is something that was obvious to me when I was young, 30 years ago and some change. I was just one of the few guys on whom they would try to play a lot of these games in my hometown. Maybe about 4 guys I could think of, they would try this on. They would not get the understanding that I'm not this dude to try to play these games on. Until I turned violent, and even then some of them didn't get it. I mean, violent with dudes, but even then some of them didn't get it. That's what the hell it took. Now, I chalked it up to being ambiguous looking and very innocent and young looking for my age, and that being the major thing. But as every decade, it seemed like there were more and more guys on whom they were trying to play these games. And with every decade of age and a part of the women, they seemed to be more aware. They started to confess more as they got older and acquired decades of age. They began to confess more and more. I had more time to hear the confessions, but they were also confessing the things they didn't confess to when they were younger. And now they're trying to do this across the board to most of you. But since I was one of the first on whom they were tried, at least in my hometown, that's how I got to see all of these things. I told you all about a childhood friend I saw when I landed at the New Orleans airport on my way back to the States to visit last summer. He was one of those guys that cute chicks wanted to get with when we were younger. Every time we saw him, he had some fine chick on his arm, and he was also driving nice cars, or a nice car, I should say. He never bragged about it, nothing like that. He was never arrogant, but he had that look. He had somewhat of a Russell Wilson look. He wasn't really ambiguous looking, but he had that so-called Indian hair, almost straight. So, but he looked like a black man with these traits. So, and he lived in New Orleans. So women weren't embarrassed to be seen out in public with him. He wasn't the type they would feel like they needed to cheat on if they got with. Not from what they said back in those days. Now, there was a girl that would make these speeches at some local events. And I happened to be at one. And she was talking to the teens there. And she said, don't have sex till you're married. That's how she was. Well, they wound up getting married. My brother, when I told him that I saw this friend at the airport on my way out to my brother's car, the friend was on his way with his sons to a trip. My brother told me who he married. And he said to me, you remember her? And I said, I can't remember the name, but I don't have a face. And he said to me, bruh, that's who he married. She was the one that was making these speeches at teen events talking about celibacy or abstinence. And I said, okay, well, then that means she better been a virgin when they got married. And my brother said, it don't matter if she's a virgin at marriage if she's going to cheat later. I looked over at him and I said, so you mean to tell me she was sleeping with somebody else? My brother said, that's why they divorced. I said, I'll be goddamn. This bitch going around here preaching all this abstinence and shit to the teens. She gets married and then waits till she's married to commit adultery. Stupid bitch. And a hypocrite at that. See, nowadays, no one's immune. That's what I'm getting at. Now, in my hometown, I already know if I'd married somebody from my hometown, very high chance she would have cheated. I already know that. So I didn't marry somebody from my hometown. I also know, now that was back then. I also know that back then, this friend of mine had a very low chance of being cheated on, marrying somebody from my hometown or his hometown, New Orleans. I knew that too. Nowadays, he has a higher chance of being cheated on than me because he lives in the US. And if he gets married, chances are that woman's going to cheat. It's a high chance that he's going to be cheated on and a low chance that he's going to cheat on her. Whereas in my case, based on where I live, very few people here are really interested in cheating. It happens, but people know to keep it hush hush, and most people are not interested in it. It's too risky. That's the first thing. And not only that, but I have the choice of marrying women who believe that it's just inherently wrong to commit adultery, which I also believe. Very low chance. That's the difference between here and there. So before it was many of you, it was already me. And that was where I gained the understanding that I wish was not true. I don't wish I didn't have it, but I gained the understanding that I wish was not true of the malice oftentimes in their motives. That's why I've recorded stuff that I've recorded. But that Superman-Lois Lane syndrome that I have not mentioned in uploads by name in well over a year, maybe a year and a half. Oh, it's still very real. It is something that the ladies have. They got the Lois Lane end of that syndrome. And in order for that to work, they have to convince you and me to have the Superman end of that syndrome so that we will feel like we don't qualify until we can fly and we are bulletproof. You understand? You got to meet unrealistic standards to qualify for an unrealistically pitiful and pathetic woman. And we believe it. And I'm telling you that idea in your head, not of hypergamy itself, but the idea of the extent of hypergamy that we have been trained to think is acceptable is ridiculous. And we've been trained to think it. It's a conspiracy. Do I blame us for falling for it? Yeah, I've always said we've been too easy. But we did not conspire to deceive ourselves about this. We just actually were dumb enough to believe it because we were also taught to not think analytically or critically when it comes to women. Well, if you overthink it, you're going to run them off. Let the bitch run then, because if she's run off by a man thinking clearly about the choice he's making maritally, sexually, and reproductively, then she's hiding something. That's it. That's all there is to it. If she has standards and you run because she's got standards, she's going to say, well, he didn't meet the standards, so he ran. Flip that shit. If you got standards and you're thinking analytically and critically and she runs, it means she can't stand the scrutiny because her ass is hiding something and she doesn't meet the standards. You question the notion you got to be Superman to qualify. That bitch is Lois Lane. She trying it. You understand now? I hope this helps. Thank you for listening. And as always, black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum, black heterosexual, non-select male power. Just because they don't like in black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. Before I continue with the rest, shout out to D. Smith for sponsoring this one too. Coming through on the Cash App. Thank you all again for flying with us here on Jet Black Air, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.